Controversy overshadows the Republican National Convention as they gather to nominate Donald Trump to be the U.S. president. Hello, I'm Anand Naidu, and this is The Heat. They gather every 4 years to choose their party's candidate for President of the United States. But this year has been anything but routine. Brash billionaire Donald Trump has taken the Republican Party by storm, leaving opponents in the dust under a barrage of insults and controversial policy proposals. So on the first day of their convention in Cleveland, Ohio, under the theme Make America Safe Again, it might come as no surprise that the day would be anything but routine. Later we'll talk to two Republicans, one for and one against Mr. Trump, but we begin at the Republican National Convention with CCTV's Nathan King. And Nathan, what's the latest going on there now?
Anand, you join us at a very opportune time. We're having the roll call of the votes here behind me. We've just passed New Mexico. We're going through the states, and they are basically saying how many delegates were for each candidate, whether it's Donald Trump or the also-rans, Ted Cruz, John Kasich, and the like. Now, there's going to be no drama here, we think, because basically these results were already known. They've already been tallied by the states, not like the drama we saw in the previous 24 hours on Monday. But what will happen here at some point is they will pause just before he reaches the magic number, and then New York, his home state, will deliver its results and put him over the top of the number of delegates required to become the official nominee. Now, he doesn't actually become the nominee, of course, until he accepts the nomination on Thursday night. Lots of theatre behind us, but this is the practice conventions have had for about 100 years now, and you're watching history in the making.
And Nathan, I did talk about controversies in my introduction there. One came from a very unlikely source, Mrs. Trump. What can you tell us about that and other takeaways from the convention so far?
That's right. After the floor fight on the first few hours of Monday about the rules and whether to have a roll call vote, people thought it was going to be just plain sailing for the evening. An uncontroversial speech by Donald Trump's wife, Melania, basically painting her picture of her husband, not just for the millions here, but for the delegates here, but for the millions watching at home as well. But minutes after her speech, the internet kind of did her thing and started comparing it to a Michelle Obama speech delivered on behalf of her husband in 2008. Charges of plagiarism were laid. Let's judge for ourselves as we play you some tape.
You work hard for what you want in life.
That you work hard for what you want in life.
That your word is your bond, that you do what you say you're going to do.
That your word is your bond, and you do what you say.
We want our children and all children in this nation to know.
Because we want our children in this nation to know
that the only limit to the height of your achievements is the reach of your dreams and your willingness to work hard for them.
That the only limit to your achievements is the strength of your dreams and your willingness to work for them.
National hockey champions.
Well, the Trump campaign defended that speech, saying that Melania herself said that she wrote most of it and that it was based on her life. But the controversy continues. Also, do watch out for more of Donald Trump's family. Two more members are speaking tonight. I should imagine fact checkers and the script checkers will be working overtime on that one. And also politicians here. Remember, some of the former presidents and presidential candidates are actually staying away. But one to watch for, Paul Ryan, who's the most powerful Republican in Congress, the Speaker of the House, is going to speak. He's been a reluctant supporter of Trump, saying, well, I'm a conservative, but he's not my type of conservative. We'll have to see what he has to say. But definitely the feeling in the hall as we get in these votes is excitement, but you know that not every delegate here is for Trump.
Thanks, Nathan. That's CCTV's Nathan King reporting from the Republican convention in Cleveland. Well, joining us here in Washington right now to talk about the convention and what's going on there is Afshin Malavi. He's the editor of the New Silk Road Monitor and a senior fellow at the Johns Hopkins School of Advanced International Studies. With us from the site of the Republican Convention is Kate Martell. She covers politics for The Hill, a newspaper and online publication. Thanks to both of you for joining us. Kate, let me start with you. This convention, of course, started on Monday, and it started with a bit of an insurrection by some delegates to the convention, anti-Trump party delegates, as they were put, who tried to change the party rules. What do you make of the convention so far?
So the convention yesterday was utter chaos. We were not expecting the Trump insurgency to get to that point. I will say that the Never Trump delegates, at this point, the chances of them actually derailing Donald Trump's candidacy are next to zero, but they've decided that if they're going out, they are going out with a bang. And at this point right now, there are rumors circulating on the floor that there are petitions going around to either add Ted Cruz's name to the convention ballot, or just to, muddy the procedural rules and then to make the people cheering over this kind of embarrassed. But at this point, it's gone off pretty much without a flaw. The District of Columbia so far has, voted for John Kasich and Marco Rubio, not who their delegates, not the delegates that they would have to go to, but it hasn't counted and it's going to Donald Trump. Now, the other two I'm going to be interested to see coming up are Utah and Washington. And while we'll already probably hit the magic number for Donald Trump at that point, the Utah and Washington delegations have already threatened walk-offs or some type of protest. So I think we're going to hear some more chaos like we heard yesterday, but I'm going to really be excited to hear what happens in the next few minutes.
Afshin, the party platform, the policy document that, tells us what the party is going to stand for, is considered by many commentators, many analysts, to be extremely right-wing. I mean, what kind of concrete policy decisions are we going to see coming out of this, like on foreign policy issues?
Sure. Well, when it comes to Donald Trump, it's hard to pin down any concrete policy decisions because he does seem to move with instinct and sometimes, speak off the cuff. And these party platforms in general are not the policy document to look for when you're looking for policy anyway in the future. The policy will come once a President Trump or a President Clinton puts together their team and they begin building their national security strategies. But Donald Trump, what has been interesting about his candidacy is that he has bucked the orthodoxy of the Republican Party. The foreign policy orthodoxy of the Republican Party has generally been pro-free trade. Donald Trump has been a populist who's shown skepticism towards free trade. The Republican orthodoxy has embraced NATO. Donald Trump has threatened to scrap NATO. And also, generally speaking, the Republican foreign policy orthodoxy has been either internationalist and sometimes interventionist. Donald Trump seems to be more native and isolationist. So he has certainly bucked the Republican orthodoxy.
Kate, I want to get back to something you just told us a moment ago about this rebellion by some delegates on the opening day of the convention to try and change the party rules. And now you tell us there could be a petition that will be circulated to get Ted Cruz's name. That's another contender for president. Are party leaders going to be able to hold this party together? Are they going to be united? Or are we going to see more rebellions of that kind before the convention ends?
That question just hit the nail on the head. Basically, unity is the key right now. And, everybody was watching on TV nationally and internationally looking at how ununified the Republican Party is. Now, the job is right now, Speaker Ryan is on the floor and an attempt to show party unity. Look, they picked Mike Pence as a running mate because he was the steady, reliable, conservative candidate that's no thrills, but won't be causing controversies necessarily that a Newt Gingrich or a Chris Christie might have shown as running mate. So from here on out, it'll be interesting to see. Mike Pence was chosen to keep it on Donald Trump and on Hillary Clinton, to try to keep the race just on them and not to pull it away, and to hopefully to try to unify the party. They're going to keep all of their attacks on Hillary Clinton. But in this race, more than other races, talk to pollsters who have said it's really hard for them to poll because, look, Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton are two of the most hated politicians in America just on favorability. So it's going to be people voting less for a candidate instead of more for a candidate. So he's going to pick the less of two evils, which I've heard some voters say. So it'll be interesting to see as well that a lot of the vulnerable senators haven't spoken. A lot of the Republicans who their seats are up. They're nervous about losing the Senate right now, and Speaker Paul Ryan is even nervous about losing the House at this rate. So at this rate, we're just going to see, a lot of these guys on the floor trying to pull together party unity and hope that a lot of these controversies, looking at Melania Trump and these rebellions, and how can we keep the party together? How can we keep the message positive and pull away from a lot of these scandals du jour?
Afshin, getting back to foreign policy issues, and I'm wondering how much of an indicator what happens at this convention could tell us about, what kind of policy, foreign policy, that a candidate will follow. I mean, if we look at Donald Trump, and as you quite rightly point out, we have very little clarity. It's very short on detail, but he has told us that he will defeat ISIL. He will scrap the TPP, that's the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which is a very big trade deal which has been negotiated by the United States and its partners on the Asian Rim. He'll push for a better trade deal with China. He will reset relations with Russia. He wants NATO allies to pay more for the defense of their countries, and he will tear up the Iranian nuclear deal. Now, can we expect the convention to endorse this, or are they just going to overlook it?
I don't think we'll see a situation where the convention will explicitly endorse all of these ideas in their platform. But I think what we will see is speakers getting a lot of applause lines based on exactly that litany of issues that you noted. We saw Rudy Giuliani last night, the former mayor of New York City, generate a lot of applause lines with his very robust attacks on ISIS and radical Islamist extremism. And so I think we'll see a lot of that, and I'll be curious as to how much Donald Trump brings foreign policy into his speech on Thursday. But as you know, and on where you stand often depends on where you sit. And when you sit at that oak desk at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, you begin to realize that these issues are far more complex than they are, than you get when the 140-character tweets.
Right. You ask the current president, he'll tell you about that. Kate, you talked about unity in the party, divisions in the party. I mean, how difficult is that going to be? Because one just has to look at the people who are at the convention right now. Some of the senior party leaders, names that we associate with the Republican Party, the Bushes, Mitt Romney, John McCain, John Kasich, the governor of the host state, they are not there.
Exactly, and a lot of these big names not being there is what could end up costing the election in November. The New York Times just came out with a new analysis to say that the chances of Hillary Clinton winning the presidency are 76%. That's a really tough burden right now in the Donald Trump campaign. So a lot of this is going to come down to fundraising at this point. And, Donald Trump was supposed to be appearing in Cleveland this morning to meet with a bunch of donors to try to build up these fundraising and to try to, rally the troops and to try to get a lot of these fundraising numbers. Now, because of all the scandal with the Melania Trump over whether or not she plagiarized her speech, Donald Trump didn't show to this meeting today. He went back to Manhattan with Melania. This is usually a prime opportunity for fundraising. So things like that are going to come down to unity. A lot of the speakers that we're going to be looking at, the Trump campaign has had a lot of difficulty getting a lot of the A-list celebrities that people have historically tried to get for the convention. He promised a lot of pizzazz, but we have a former NASA astronaut, and we have a few members and we have a few celebrities, but it's very much the Donald Trump show. He said that he wants his family very much a part of it. That's why he has 4 of his adult children speaking. That's why he had Melania speaking. So it's really, can they pull this together? Can they kind of rally the troops and get all this excitement? And it'll come down to the next few days to see that.
Well, they may have to do that because we've just heard that he has reached that threshold of 1,237 delegates. He is now officially the Republican nominee for president. Afshin, I want to get back to some of the policy issues we were talking about. In the weeks ahead, in campaigning before the election, is Donald Trump going to be forced to actually put some meat on the bones of these policies that he's been talking about? I mean, let's take something like the very controversial statement he made right at the outset, saying that he would ban Muslims from the United States. I mean, that changed to, it would be a temporary measure. And now, in an interview that he had on a United States network, CBS, on 60 Minutes, he said that, well, I'm actually not talking about people, I'm talking about territories. I mean, are we going to see details on this?
You know, if he goes by his own playbook, and, you know, I often say that what we witnessed with Donald Trump was a popular hijacking of the Republican Party. And I say popular because it's not a hijacking. He did win. He did win the votes, right, in the Republican primaries. But if he goes by his playbook, there really isn't a need to put meat on the bones of the policy, because he's won elections and primaries, you know, among Republican voters by you know, playing to some of the red meat. And I think what's going to happen is he's going to have to keep the enthusiasm of his base. These elections are always a turnout, but the problem that Trump is going to run into, which is I think what that New York Times analysis points to, is that you have to generate enthusiasm among your base, and he certainly has that. But can he get the independent swing voters? And that's where maybe, you know, putting some meat on the bones actually won't even help him, because the independent voters that are polled don't necessarily embrace the policies that brought Donald Trump this far.
Yeah, and he's not going to win the election with just the base.
That's right.
Right, okay. Kate, let's talk about Donald Trump's vice presidential pick. It's Mike Pence, who is currently the Indiana governor. And, you know, if we look at Mike Pence and Donald Trump, they differ on so many key issues here. Trump, for instance, has told us that he's against the TPP. We were talking about that a moment ago, the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Pence supports it. Trump is against NAFTA, that's a North American Free Trade Agreement. Pence is for it. Trump opposes intervention in Libya. Pence supports it. Trump wants to repeal Obamacare. Pence has actually expanded Obamacare in his state, Indiana. So when we look at all those differences, and these are pretty key differences here, why did he choose Mike Pence?
They're very key differences. The reason he chose Pence is not because of policy. He pulled them in to try to unify the Republican Party and to try to keep a lot of Capitol Hill happy. Mike Pence is very beloved by both the left and the right on Capitol Hill. It'll make it very tough for Democrats to begin to bash him. He chose him because he's good at fundraising. He's a known fundraiser when he was a representative before he was governor of Indiana. And Mike Pence, he's sturdy, he's reliable, he's conservative. But I think that's what's going to come down to, too, is who Hillary Clinton chooses as her vice president. The fact that Donald Trump chose, you know, the safe pick instead of going more firecracker choice like a Newt Gingrich or a Chris Christie, gives her a lot more flexibility. And it goes back to these independent votes. You know, they're trying to be able to pull in a lot of the conservatives, but it's not going to necessarily pull in a lot more independent voters or excite new voters or a lot of the base. It'll pull in evangelicals, but not necessarily independents. Now, if Hillary Clinton chooses a vice presidential running mate like a Tim Kaine, who's not necessarily a progressive, it might be able to pull in some of those independent voters we were talking about, some of those hawkish Republicans. On the other hand, if she chooses a more progressive pick like an Elizabeth Warren or a Sherrod Brown, it's going to be able to possibly give more votes to a Donald Trump and maybe pull it in his favor.
Thanks, Kate. That's The Hill's Kate Martell talking to us there from the convention in Cleveland, Ohio. We're going to have to say goodbye to you right now. Staying with us is Afshan Malavi. We need to take a break right now. When we come back, two Republicans who disagree about the candidacy of Donald Trump. Stay with us. You're watching The Heat. Welcome back. We're talking about Donald Trump and the Republican National Convention. Joining us now from Cleveland is Republican political and communications strategist Matt Mackowiak. Afshan Malavi is still with us here in Washington, and also joining us from the site of the convention is former Republican Congressman Pete Hoekstra. Thanks again to all of you. Congressman, let me start with you. Lots of talk coming out of the convention right now on unity in the Republican Party. There's some talk that it's in so much disarray right now that it might be beyond repair. And we saw party officials on day one put down a rebellion, something of an insurrection, by some delegates to try and change party rules. What does this tell you about the state of the party right now?
Oh, I think the state of the party is not a party in disarray at all. I think it is a party that's coming together. We recognize that Donald Trump talks to a lot of voters that have not been talking or engaged with the Republican Party for a long time. We want those new voters. We want those people joining the Republican Party. And sure, we're going through some changes and we're struggling with some of those, but we're a party that's coming together. And come over the next 12, 13 weeks, we are going to be a party that's united, and we're going to be positioned to be very successful in November.
Matt, what do you make of it? Donald Trump's just been, announced as the nominee for president for the Republican Party. He clearly does not have the support of the entire party. We've heard that. But I guess, on the other hand, he was the choice of voters, for Republican Party voters. So how does one explain that?
Yeah, I think it's important to remember we had a very large field, 17 candidates, probably more like 6 or 8 that went all the way through the first 4 states. And because the field was that large, Trump never really got a majority anywhere. So he won the nomination with a plurality. That made the need for party unification all the more pronounced. And so, look, I think it's fair to be critical about the unity efforts that happened right after he essentially ended the primary race in Indiana. I think he could have done a little bit better in that regard. But that said, look, party conventions exist for 2 reasons. One, to formally nominate the president and vice presidential candidates. But secondly, it's to unify parties going into the general elections. And so I agree with Chairman Hoekstra. We are seeing unity this week. I thought the vice presidential choice of Indiana Governor Mike Pence was an excellent move from Donald Trump. This is someone who's safe, who's solid, who's credible, who has policy knowledge, who reaches out to conservatives, who's well known among evangelicals, who has Washington experience, but has also been an executive in an important state like Indiana. And so I think by the end of this week, the party is going to be much more unified than it was coming in. Yes, there have been some disruptions. Yes, some frustrations have been aired by some delegates. But now that Trump is the nominee in terms of the delegates making that decision, there's really no choice going forward. It's now Hillary or Trump. Who do you want to be president for the next 4 years?
Congressman, what would you like to see come out of this convention at the end of the week in terms not just of party unity, but also in terms of what kind of direction the party is going to take?
Well, I think clearly the direction is already being set. This president or this presidential team is going to focus on national security. I thought a great case was laid out last night as to why Barack Obama and Secretary of State Hillary Clinton have really been architects of a disastrous foreign policy. Tonight we're going to be talking about the economy. Those are the key issues that voters are concerned about. Who's going to get America moving forward again from an economic standpoint? Who's going to provide the leadership to make sure that America fights the threats that we face, this radical Islamic threat? How are we going to contain it, confront it, and ultimately defeat it? Those are the 2 issues that Americans are looking for leadership on, and that I think Donald Trump and Mike Pence are going to be able to provide.
Matt, our guest in the studio here, Afshin Malawi, made a great point in the earlier part of the show in which he said, look, Donald Trump has the support of the Republican base, but now the battle is going to be to get the support of independents. A lot of his policies, a lot of his announcements have been seen as radical, they're being seen as extreme. So what does he do now to get those independents?
Yeah, you often see this challenge presented to candidates for president, but also for candidates who run for U.S. Senate or governor. And that is, you generally have to run to your base in a primary, and you have to run to the middle in a general election. And so, look, I think Trump has real potential in reaching out to independents and into conservative Democrats, white working class in states like Michigan, where Chairman Hoekstra comes from, across the Rust Belt. He has a chance to perform better than expected in states like Pennsylvania, Ohio, Iowa, Wisconsin, Michigan. If he could win 5 or 6 of those states, he could afford to lose states in the Southwest and still get to 270 electoral votes. So obviously he's going to need to fully unify the party. Right now he's at 80 or 85% of Republicans supporting him. He's got to get that above 90% to 92 or 93% by the time the election rolls around. But you got to do that while you're also reaching out to independent voters. It is a challenge. It's one that's facing him as he goes forward.
Afshin, Donald Trump has been accused of, bluster, of not telling the truth, of being not ready for the job. Right. But Republican Party officials tell us that at the end of this convention, we will see a very different Donald Trump. We will see someone who's ready to enter the White House.
Right. You know, I think what we will see is we'll see a more human Donald Trump. I mean, you know, particularly the fact that he has 4 of his adult children speaking about him. I think there's always a post-convention bounce, you know, when we see these kind of things, and particularly when, by all accounts, he has produced 4 very able and dynamic and interesting children who are successful in their careers and have families, et cetera, et cetera. Now, I think the question, though, about Donald Trump is that he won this election on some of that bluster, right? So if he suddenly becomes, you know, timid, you know, run to the center candidate Trump, you know, will he be as appealing to some of his base as he was when he was, you know, willing to challenge Republican orthodoxy, willing to say things that people thought politically incorrect? And in fact, when you talk to people who are his voters, they say, well, we like the fact that he didn't play the establishment game.
Right. Congressman, we just have about 40 seconds left. If you had to be giving advice to the Trump campaign right now, what would you be telling them?
I'd be telling them pretty much to stay on track. They've got to fine-tune and they've got to work out some of the wrinkles and those types of things. But in states like mine, states like Michigan, he's appealing to the independent voters right now. The blue-collar Democrat votes, Macomb County and those types of places, they like Donald Trump. Keep going out there, speak with a strong voice, you know, stay on message, and you're going to be just fine.
Okay, we're going to have to leave it there. Thanks to all of you for joining us. That's it for this edition of The Heat. I'm Anand Naidu in Washington, D.C. Thanks for being with us.